Have you ever felt um, like your life was already completely written for you?
Oh, yeah, that creeping sensation.
Right, that unsettling feeling that you were just following a script laid out by your parents or your job, or, just the rigid expectations of society at large.
Like you're just hitting your marks.
Exactly. You wake up, you hit your marks, you say your lines, and in those quiet moments right before you fall asleep, you kind of wonder who actually wrote this scene.
It's a universally relatable anxiety, I think.
It really is. Welcome to our deep dive. I am incredibly glad you're joining us today because we are stepping into a narrative that takes that exact feeling of being scripted
Yeah.
and makes it straight up terrifyingly literal.
It is such a profound concept to explore today. We are immersing ourselves completely in the world of Garrett Curbow's novel, Whispers of Ink and Starlight.
And the central premise we're looking at today is just, it's wild.
It really is. What if the phrase putting your blood, sweat, and tears into a story wasn't just, a colorful metaphor for hard work?
What if it was literal?
Exactly. What if an author possessed the actual, tangible ability to create a living, breathing human being out of ink and paper?
It's a mind-bending concept
Hmm.
and, frankly, um, a deeply unsettling one the more you think about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Our mission today for this deep dive is to follow the journey of two 21-year-olds who are both trapped, but in wildly different ways.
Right. So on one hand, we have James Finch.
Yeah, James. He's an aspiring writer who is just slowly suffocating under the immense weight of his family's expectations in this small southern town.
And on the other hand, we have Nell.
Nelle, a woman who was literally written into existence by a grieving author. She spent her entire life struggling to gain even a shred of control over her own narrative.
It's a fascinating contrast. And by the time we reach the end of our discussion today, I guarantee you are going to be thinking entirely differently about the concept of personal agency.
And the toxic nature of absolute control.
Yes, and the beautiful but often terrifying burden of wielding creative power. We are going to trace their path from a sleepy, sweltering town in Georgia all the way to the misty, secretive highlands of Scotland.
I want to start right at the beginning, setting the scene in Lincoln, Georgia. It's summer, it's relentlessly hot, and we are introduced to James Finch.
He's 21, home from college for the summer.
Right, and he is completely dreading his predetermined path. From what the book lays out, his parents have this incredibly rigid plan for him, don't they?
They do. His father is the literal mayor of the town.
Wow.
Yeah, a very charismatic, very presentable, quintessential small-town politician. And because of that, there is an immense unspoken pressure on James to maintain a certain image.
He has to be the perfect mayor's son.
Exactly. His parents have orchestrated this perfectly safe, highly respectable route for him. He is supposed to study biology at the University of Georgia.
Biology,
Yeah.
which he hates, right?
He despises it. But the plan is for him to eventually go into medicine or perhaps environmental law and become a pillar of the community. It is the classic safe route that guarantees stability and social standing.
But that's not who James is at all internally. He's yearning for something completely different.
Internally, James wants nothing more than to move to New York City and write fiction.
The contrast there is just so stark.
It really is. In his mind, he is dreaming of epic narratives and grand cityscapes, but his day-to-day reality. He's spending his summer trapped in a stifling, underfunded office.
Working for the Lincoln Gazette, right?
Yes, writing excruciatingly boring articles about new crosswalks and zoning ordinances.
That sounds miserable for a creative person.
And he works under a very demanding, unsympathetic editor named Nancy, who basically just reinforces his feeling of being a tiny cog in a very mundane machine.
It sounds incredibly isolating. He's surrounded by people who know exactly who he's supposed to be, but literally nobody knows who he actually is.
He is essentially a young man running on fumes, cheap office coffee, and the secret late-night hours he spends locked in his bedroom.
Hunched over that typewriter.
Yes, a Teal Smith Corona typewriter. That typewriter is his only rebellion. He is living as a hermit in his own life, completely walled off from genuine connection because he is just too afraid to disappoint the people who scripted his existence.
And speaking of hermits and being walls off just a few miles away from James, on a dead-end street called Blackwood Road, there is someone experiencing confinement on a completely different, horrifying level.
Nelle.
Can you introduce us to Nelle?
Nelle is also 21, but her reality is entirely foreign to anything James could even comprehend.
She's locked away.
She has spent every single day of her life locked inside a historic, forest green colonial house by a man she simply calls father.
whose real name is Wallace Quill.
Right. And Nelle isn't just pressured to stay home like James is. She is literally forbidden from leaving. She isn't allowed to speak to anyone outside. Her entire connection to the external world is mediated through the glass of her bedroom window.
What does she see out of that window? Because if that's her only access to the world, it must be incredibly formative for her psychology.
It is. Day after day, she watches the world happen without her. But the detail the author focuses on heavily is a neighboring field where wild horses run.
The horses.
She watches these magnificent creatures galloping, their manes glowing in the harsh summer sun. She just aches for that wildness.
That's such a powerful image.
Yeah.
The horses galloping freely while she's trapped behind glass. Why do you think Curbow chose horses specifically?
Horses carry a very specific dual symbolism. They are majestic, inherently powerful, and deeply passionate creatures. When they run, they embody absolute freedom.
But they're also broken.
Exactly. In our human world, they are so often tamed, fenced in, and penned. They are broken to serve a master. Nelle sees her own tragic potential in them.
She relates to them.
She knows she has that same wild energy inside her, but she's constrained by the fences erected by her creator. It's a tension that resonates deeply, that feeling of having immense potential, but being restricted by boundaries placed upon you by others.
So we have these two incredibly trapped souls. One fenced in by societal expectation, the other fenced in by literal walls and a tyrannical father figure.
And then we hit the inciting incident.
Yes, this beautiful inciting incident. It's the 4th of July. The whole town of Lincoln is gathered in the town square. I can practically smell this scene from the book's description.
The sensory details are amazing.
You have the sharp scent of vinegar barbecue wafting from Lindsay's smokehouse, the sulfur of fireworks smoke hanging in the humid air, kids running around with sparklers.
And James is there, standing by his politician father.
Feeling totally alienated and trapped in this performative role of the mayor's son. And then he spots her, a girl he's never seen before, in a town where everybody knows absolutely everybody.
She is sitting completely alone on a park bench. She's wearing a simple white sundress. She is eating a half-finished corn dog, and there are tears just streaming down her face.
A corn dog and tears.
Yeah.
It's such an incredibly specific, almost bizarre image. Why is she crying over a corn dog?
This is where the story anchors its magical realism in something profoundly human. For James, a corn dog is just cheap, greasy festival food. It's totally mundane.
But for Nelle.
For Nelle, who has been walled off from humanity her entire existence, whose diet and experiences have been strictly controlled and curated by Quill, this moment is a sensory explosion.
Right, because she's never had it before.
The taste of this greasy, sweet, salty food, the chaotic chatter of the crowd, the deafening blast of the fireworks overhead, it is a profound, overwhelming miracle.
She is experiencing the chaotic beauty of the world in high definition for the very first time.
Exactly. The tears are a reaction to the sheer, crushing weight of finally feeling alive.
James is obviously intrigued. He works up the nerve to go talk to her, stepping away from his father's political orbit, and they end up playing a game of 20 questions while the fireworks go off.
It's a very tentative, beautiful connection.
James, perhaps emboldened by the anonymity of this strange girl, actually admits his secret dream of moving to New York to be a writer. He hasn't even confessed that to his own family.
And then he asks Nelle what she wants to be when she grows up.
What is her answer?
After a long, thoughtful pause, she flashes this big, slightly awkward, toothy grin and says, "A horse."
A horse. Haha. It's charming, it's undeniably weird, and it completely captivates him.
He's used to everyone in this town having perfectly rehearsed, socially acceptable ambitions, and here is a girl who just wants to be a wild animal.
But the connection is cut short. Right as the courthouse bell rings 10 o'clock, she abruptly panics and flees.
She runs off into the shadows of the town square like Cinderella desperately leaving the ball before the spell breaks.
Leaving James completely bewildered, but entirely hooked.
When they meet, they instantly recognize the invisible cage surrounding the other person, even if they don't know the specifics yet. There is a kinship in their confinement.
And the specifics of Nelle's confinement are so much darker than James could possibly imagine. He is so obsessed with this brief encounter that a few days later, he tracks her down.
She had let slip the address, 23 Blackwood Road.
He goes up to this imposing forest green colonial house, knocks on the heavy wooden door, and he comes face to face with Wallace Quill. Set the scene for us. What is James's impression of this man?
The encounter is instantly chilling. The text describes Quill as having these cold, coal-like eyes that immediately radiate danger and a deep, unsettling possessiveness.
He doesn't seem like a normal dad.
He is not a welcoming father. He is a warden. But what truly disturbs James is looking past Quill into the house. Sitting at the kitchen table is Nelle.
But she doesn't look like the girl from the fireworks, does she?
Not at all. She is pale, completely lifeless, and staring blankly at a bowl of plain oatmeal.
Just staring at oatmeal.
Her posture is rigid. Her eyes are vacant. She looks absolutely nothing like the vibrant, laughing, tear-stained girl he connected with just days prior. It chills James to the bone.
Okay, I have to ask, because as a reader, you were just screaming at the page at this point.
Yeah.
How does a girl go from being so vibrantly alive, experiencing the world in high definition, to sitting at a kitchen table like a literal zombie?
What did Quill do to her in those intervening days?
Yeah, what happened?
That is the profound mystery that James is faced with, and it drives him to take a massive risk. He cannot let the image of that lifeless girl go.
So what did he do?
That night, under the cover of darkness, he sneaks back to 23 Blackwood Road. He climbs up the trellis to Nell's second-story bedroom window. He taps on the glass, desperate to understand what is happening to her.
And this is where the entire genre of the story shifts, isn't it? It goes from this quirky, small-town coming-of-age romance into straight-up psychological, magical horror.
Completely.
Because Nelle realizes that trying to explain her situation with words will sound like absolute madness.
Yeah.
She has to show him.
Precisely. She opens the window. She looks at James, takes a jagged piece of broken glass from a picture frame, and right in front of his eyes, she slices open the palm of her hand.
You have to imagine standing on that trellis, holding your breath, watching a girl purposefully cut herself.
Yeah.
But it's not blood that comes out.
Oh. This is the moment the paradigm completely shatters for James. Instead of red blood, what leaps from her palm is pungent, thick black ink. It carries the heavy, distinct metallic scent of a print shop. It drips down and actually stains James's canvas sneakers.
In heels, right.
Yes, as he watches in absolute paralyzed horror, the cut on her palm knits itself completely back together within seconds, leaving unblemished, perfect skin. It is physically impossible, but it is happening right in front of him.
I mean, how do you even process that? It's not a metaphor. She is literally full of ink.
Nelle finally explains the truth to a staggered James. She says, "I'm an idea, a figment of someone's imagination." She reveals the dark history of the man downstairs. 22 years ago, Wallace Quill was a highly celebrated best-selling author. He was married to a woman named Bianca, and they had a beautiful infant daughter named Eleanor.
But there was a fire.
A horrific, devastating house fire tore through their home, taking the lives of both his wife and his child.
That is an unfathomable level of grief.
It broke him completely. In the depths of his agonizing pain, Quill stopped publishing for the world. He retreated from society.
And he started writing again, but just for himself.
He locked himself in his study and started writing a character, a baby girl, into his private journals, desperately trying to cope with the void left by his daughter.
He poured everything into it.
Every ounce of his soul, his sorrow, and his meticulous descriptive power went into this creation. And one morning, he woke up, and the impossible had happened. There she was in a pink bassinet in his home, flesh, bone, and ink.
Nelle is that character.
Nelle is that character.
I want to push back on this a little bit, or at least explore the friction here. I hear that backstory, and there is a part of me that feels a deep, agonizing sympathy for Quill.
Sure.
He lost everything in a fire. The sheer desperation of wanting your child back so badly that you literally write them into existence? Isn't there something almost tragically beautiful about that? Can we entirely blame a man broken by grief for wanting to recreate life?
It is a valid tension to explore, and the novel demands that we wrestle with it. The grief is unimaginable, yes. But this raises a monumental ethical question about the nature of creation.
Right.
We often talk about artists pouring their souls into their work, but what are the moral implications of Quill's actions? Does immense tragedy excuse playing God?
He created a life to fill a selfish void.
Exactly. And in doing so, he inevitably turned his miraculous creation into a prisoner of his own unresolved trauma.
Because once she exists, she is a sentient being.
Yeah.
And the way he treats her is horrifying. Walk us through the actual mechanics of her daily life, because this is where any sympathy for Quill completely evaporates for me.
The rules of her existence are a living nightmare. Quill controls Nelle with absolute terrifying precision. Every single day, he forces her to drain a portion of her ink, her literal lifeblood, into small glass vials.
And what does he do with the ink?
He uses that specific ink in his fountain pen to write out her daily itineraries in his leather-bound journals.
Wait, so he writes what she is going to do, and she just has to do it.
It is entirely involuntary. If he writes in his journal, on the 16th day of May, Nelle will wake up at 8 o'clock, walk to the kitchen, and eat a bowl of plain oatmeal, she physically has no choice but to execute that text.
Her body just takes over.
Her bones, her muscles, her vocal cords simply move against her conscious will to fulfill the written command.
That is deeply disturbing. Just imagine waking up and feeling your legs swing out of bed, walking down the hall, and your hands preparing food, all while your mind is screaming, I don't want to do this.
It is the ultimate violation of bodily autonomy.
It's a terrifying metaphor for severe emotional abuse and gaslighting, isn't it?
It is the extreme logical conclusion of a controlling relationship. Quill justifies this horror by telling Nelle that he keeps her locked away, dictating her every move to protect her from a dangerous world.
But he is the danger.
He is the immediate danger. He strips away every ounce of her human agency to soothe his own anxiety, and furthermore, he enforces this captivity with a terrifying threat.
The death threat.
Yes, he has conditioned Nelle to believe that if she ever picks up a pen and attempts to write for herself using her own ink, she will instantly die. He maintains his monopoly on her life through ultimate fear.
She is a literal masterpiece being held hostage by the obsessive painter who created her. But James discovering her secret changes the entire dynamic. The isolation is broken.
It changes everything.
Let's fast forward a bit to the climax of this first act. Quill inevitably catches James sneaking into the house. It leads to this incredibly tense confrontation in Quill's study, which sounds like an absolute nightmare of a room.
The study is essentially the archive of Nelle's enslaved existence. It is lined floor to ceiling with hundreds of leather-bound journals containing every single day of her life.
The smell must be overwhelming.
The scent of ink and old, dry paper is suffocating. And when Quill catches James, he pulls a heavy pistol from his desk.
He has a gun.
He is unraveling, ranting about how Nelle belongs to him, how he authored her, and how James is an intruder trying to steal his property.
Such a tense scene.
You have the dark wood of a massive grandfather clock ticking rhythmically in the corner, counting down the seconds, and the visceral image of this grieving, obsessive man holding a gun to a terrified 21-year-old kid.
But James came prepared, didn't he? He has this secret weapon that Nelle entrusted to him.
Yes. Days earlier, Nelle had secretly siphoned off just a few precious drops of her own ink and given it to James in a tiny glass vial that he wears on a chain around his neck.
And as the grandfather clock strikes midnight,
Its heavy chimes vibrating through the floorboards, James makes a desperate move. He lunges and punches Quill in the face.
but they can't just run out the door, right? Because as long as Quill has a pen and paper, he can just write a command forcing Nelle to freeze.
Exactly. Physical escape is impossible without breaking the narrative hold. So James rips the vial from his neck, shatters it, smears his finger in Nelle's ink, and right there, directly onto the skin of his own arm, he frantically writes a command.
What does he write?
Nelle goes into the gas station.
Goes into the gas station. It's such a random panicked thought, but what happens the second he finishes that sentence?
The moment he crosses the last T and dots the I, the fundamental laws of the room shift. Nelle describes the sensation beautifully. She says her bones suddenly felt like unlocked manacles.
Oh, wow.
The physical and psychological control Quill held over her simply vanishes because James's written command, written with her blood, legally overrides Quill's previous script.
The adrenaline of that moment must be insane. She realizes she can move her own hands, make her own choices. And what is her very first choice as a liberated being?
She looks at Quill, she looks at the hundreds of journals that meticulously detail her 21 years of slavery, and she refines the command. She looks at James and tells him to write 2 words.
Which are?
Burn it all.
Burn it all.
And they do. They knock over oil lamps, set the study ablaze, destroying the oppressive archive of her past, and they flee into the suffocating Georgia night as the historic house goes up in towering flames behind them.
They hit the highway.
Escaping the dark captivity of 23 Blackwood Road and driving headlong into the blinding, chaotic light of actual freedom.
Okay, so they escape the burning house. But where do you even go when you literally don't exist on paper? You don't have a social security number, a bank account, a history. How do they navigate the real world?
That is the immediate logistical hurdle. Fortunately, they are traveling under documents that Quill had meticulously forged for her years ago.
The Eleanor Quill passport.
No. Yes, a birth certificate and a passport under the name Eleanor Quill, created just in case he ever needed to move her. James, seeking a place where they can disappear and figure out their next steps, drives them straight north to New York City.
They go to his cousin's place, right?
They end up crashing at the apartment of his cousin Jesse in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
I have to say, I absolutely love the character of Jessie. She is this successful, beautifully chaotic, incredibly cool artist. And dropping Nelle into Williamsburg is such a brilliant narrative choice.
It is the ultimate contrast.
Theirs goes from a sterile, controlled environment where she only sees a field of horses to the absolute sensory overload of New York.
The author provides these incredibly rich descriptions of her awakening. On the drive up, they stop at a dive bar in Washington, D.C., and Nelle is fascinated by the feeling of her shoes sticking to the spilled beer on the floor.
She loves the grime.
When they reach Jesse's apartment, she is overwhelmed by the smells: Jesse cooking spicy ramen, the scent of weed smoke lingering in the hallway, the rumble of the subway trains vibrating up through the floorboards.
It's also new to her.
The tactile sensation of pressing the heavy keys of vintage cash registers in used bookstores. It is an absolute feast for a girl who grew up on a diet of unseasoned oatmeal.
That makes me wonder about her own creative output.
Mm.
Because Quill was an author, he obviously imparted some level of appreciation for art, but it was all completely controlled. What happens when she is finally given access to the tools of creation without supervision?
It leads to one of the most poignant moments in the novel. In New York, she sneaks into Jesse's art studio while Jesse is out. She is confronted with a massive blank white canvas.
Which is terrifying for her.
Initially, yes. The blank space represents the unknown, which she has been conditioned to fear. She is also deeply intimidated by traditional art supplies, as Quill tightly monitored what she was allowed to paint with.
So what does she do? How does she bridge that gap?
Instead of reaching for the expensive oils or acrylics, she picks up a thin paintbrush and dips it directly into her cup of morning coffee. And using this entirely unconventional, unapproved medium, she paints a magnificent sweeping watercolor of a flying palomino horse soaring majestically over a jagged city skyline.
Let's talk about the profound symbolism of that coffee painting, because it feels central to her entire character arc. We know she admires horses for being wild and majestic.
Right.
But now, she's painted one with wings soaring over the skyscrapers of New York, painted with the very beverage that fuels waking life. It is the perfect merger of her past the view from the Blackwood window and her newly liberated urban reality.
It's a beautiful synthesis.
It really makes you wonder, if you suddenly had that level of absolute unmonitored freedom after a lifetime of confinement, what would your coffee painting be? What is the pure, unfiltered thing you would create just to prove to the universe that you could?
It highlights the joy of unburdened creation. And while Nelle's experiencing this artistic breakthrough, James is having a massive creative awakening of his own. The city acts as a catalyst for him, too.
Right, because he's finally free from the stifling expectations of Lincoln. He doesn't have his dad breathing down his neck about biology class.
Exactly. Freed from the dread of his predetermined life, James finally finds his narrative flow. Using a clunky red typewriter he finds in Jesse's spare bedroom, he enters a fugue state of writing.
He writes a whole book.
In just 2 weeks, he drafts an entire novel. He titles it The Summer Curse, and it draws heavily from the magical, terrifying, and romantic journey he and Nelle are experiencing.
It sounds incredibly romantic. They are falling madly, deeply in love as they explore the city, and eventually they even travel to Europe using her forged passport.
They go to Paris.
There's this sweeping cinematic scene of them standing atop the Eiffel Tower, the wind in their hair, realizing they are absolute soulmates. But beneath all this romance, there is a huge, lingering irony hanging over their freedom, isn't there? A fundamental imbalance.
Yes, and it is a brilliantly executed tension. We have to examine the power dynamic. Yes, James bravely freed Nelle from the burning house. Yes, he loves her fiercely, but James is still the one holding the pen.
Because Nelle is still absolutely paralyzed by the fear that if she writes for herself, she will die, just as Quill conditioned her to believe.
Precisely. So anytime Nelle wants to leave Jesse's apartment to get a coffee, or anytime she wants to wander a museum in Paris, James has to take a needle, extract a drop of her ink, dip his finger or a pen in it, and literally write out a permission slip.
On a yellow legal pad.
On a yellow legal pad. He has to script her freedom.
That is so deeply tragic. Even though his intentions are pure and he loves her, the dynamic is fundamentally skewed. He holds her leash.
He is the benevolent dictator to Quill's malevolent one, but he is still a dictator.
It forces us to ask a critical question about autonomy. Can a person ever truly be considered free if their very existence, their ability to walk down the street, requires the constant validation, permission, and literal handwriting of another person?
The novel firmly suggests that the answer is no. True freedom cannot be achieved while you are still running from the trauma of the past, or while your movements are dependent on someone else's script.
And speaking of the past, they cannot run from it forever. While they are in Paris, soaking in the romance of the city, reality comes crashing back down. Walk us through what happens in that Parisian bookshop.
They are casually wandering the streets, dipping in and out of shops, when they step into a quiet, dusty bookstore. There, displayed prominently on a table of new releases, is a novel titled Ravel.
And the author.
The author's name, printed boldly on the cover, is Wallace Quill.
Oh man, that is a total gut punch.
It is a chilling, horrifying moment of realization. It means that Quill did not burn in the fire at 23 Blackwood Road. He survived.
He is alive and publishing again.
And undoubtedly, he is hunting for his stolen masterpiece.
And as if that external threat isn't terrifying enough, Nelle's internal world starts fracturing at the exact same time. She begins having these incredibly vivid, haunting dreams.
The dreams are visceral and inescapable. She repeatedly sees a rugged stone cottage sitting on the edge of a dark, glassy lake. She sees fresh footprints crunching in deep snow and the warm glow of a lantern cutting through heavy mist.
It feels like a memory she shouldn't have.
It is pulling her like a magnetic force, demanding her attention.
How do they interpret these dreams? Where do they lead them?
Nelle remembers fragments of stories Quill used to tell her during her captivity, stories about his childhood growing up in the harsh, isolated highlands of Scotland.
So they decide to go.
Realizing that the only way to move forward is to confront the origin of her existence, they take a train from Paris directly to Edinburgh.
They are walking right into the lion's den.
They are. In Edinburgh, they track down an old childhood friend of Quill's, a man named Terry Nolan, who runs a bustling coffee shop called the Underground Cafe.
They need information.
James and Nelle pose as investigative reporters, writing a retrospective obituary for Quill, claiming they believe he died in the Georgia fire. Through this ruse, they managed to get specific directions from Terry to the small, remote coastal village of Summaries.
Summaries, where Quill spent his formative years. And Summaries is where all the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. This is where the lore of the novel just explodes.
It really does.
When they arrive in this bleak, beautiful Scottish landscape, what do they find?
They find the dilapidated remains of the old stone cottage from Nelle's dreams. But far more importantly, they encounter a fierce, sharp-minded elderly woman living nearby who immediately sees right through James's flimsy cover story.
Penelope Waters.
This woman reveals herself to be Penelope Waters.
Wait, Penelope Waters. So Wallace Quill has a grandmother. He's not just an isolated genius. He comes from a family.
Yes, and Penelope is the keeper of the family's darkest secrets. She invites them into her home for tea, and sitting by the fire, she drops the most devastating truth bomb of the entire narrative.
Tell us.
The curse of the Inkblood, this terrifying magical ability, is not some freak one-off anomaly that began with Quill. It is deeply generational.
The implications of that are staggering. It means there is a history to this magic. How far back does it go?
Penelope explains the lineage. Her late husband, a mild-mannered accountant named Samford, possessed the magic. He inadvertently passed it down through his bloodline to their daughter, Lily.
Quill's mother.
Right. And Lily, in turn, passed it to her son, Wallace Quill.
How did previous generations use this power? I can't imagine an accountant doing what Quill did.
They used it in wildly different ways, reflecting their own psychologies. Samford, the accountant, used his ink subtly to manipulate ledgers and ensure financial stability, keeping his power hidden.
That makes sense for an accountant, but what about Lily?
Lily was entirely different. Lily was an erratic, brilliant, wildly emotional poet. She essentially dictated the chaotic events of her own life in verse.
So she wrote her own reality.
Everyone in the village thought she was simply eccentric or suffering from madness, but Penelope knew the truth. Lily was literally writing her chaotic reality into existence, stanza by stanza.
So Lily was shaping the world around her, but what about Quill? Penelope sheds light on Quill's origin story too, right? Because we really need to understand how a boy from the Scottish Highlands becomes a monster in Georgia.
Penelope's recounting of Quill's childhood is tragic. Quill was a sensitive boy who felt entirely unseen and unloved by his father, Thomas. Thomas blatantly favored Quill's younger, more athletic brother, Sam.
Which created a ton of resentment.
This intense favoritism created a deep, festering resentment within young Wallace. This familial tension eventually culminated in a horrific, traumatic accident where young Sam drowned in the very lake behind the stone cottage.
So Quill's entire personality, his obsessive need for absolute control, his tyrannical nature, his fear of unpredictability, it all stems from feeling utterly powerless, unloved, and out of control as a child.
Exactly. But the darkest, most horrifying revelation Penelope shares is not about his childhood, but about the house fire in Georgia that killed Quill's wife Bianca and his infant daughter Eleanor.
The fire that sparked the creation of Nelle. We were led to believe that was a tragic accident, a faulty wire, a stroke of terrible luck.
It was not a faulty wire. Penelope, who has kept tabs on her grandson, reveals the devastating truth. Quill accidentally caused the fire himself.
You're kidding. How?
He woke up in the middle of the night, perhaps gripped by a sudden fiery thought or a lingering nightmare. In a state of half-sleep, he absent-mindedly reached for his special fountain pen, the one filled with his own ink blood, and jotted down a description of flames on a piece of paper.
He wrote a fire into existence.
The realization is crushing. He didn't just passively lose his family to tragedy. His own unchecked power was the direct instrument of their destruction.
Oh my God. The weight of that guilt is completely suffocating. It completely recontextualizes everything we know about him.
It really does.
He locked Nelle up in that house, not just because he was a controlling abuser, but because he was absolutely terrified of his own power. He knew firsthand what his ink was capable of destroying.
Yes. Penelope leads James and Nelle to a hidden room in her home, a secret library packed from floor to ceiling, with the bound journals, ledgers, and poetry of Samford, Lily, and Wallace.
A physical archive of the curse.
It's a literal archive of human lives, spontaneous actions, and catastrophic, irreversible mistakes.
You just have to sit with that for a moment. Imagine the psychological weight of standing in that room, looking at those shelves, and knowing that your entire family history is essentially a series of magical, fatal errors.
It's a heavy burden.
But amid all this darkness and tragedy, Penelope gives Nelle a crucial piece of lore that changes everything, doesn't she?
She does. Penelope shatters the foundational lie of Nelle's existence. She reveals that the magic is not inherently tied to the physical pen or the paper.
Then what is it tied to?
The magic, she explains, is a muscle. The true power lives in the blood itself. With enough focus and practice, a person burdened with this curse doesn't even need to write things down physically. They can shape reality using just their mind and the ink flowing in their veins.
Which means Quill's ultimate threat was a complete lie.
Precisely. Penelope looks Nelle in the eye and tells her the truth. Nelle will not die if she writes for herself. Lily did it, Samford did it, Quill did it.
She won't die.
Nelle is not a singular, delicate freak of nature destined to be controlled. She is the inheritor of a powerful lineage of creators.
That realization must be the ultimate catalyst for Nelle. Everything she's ever believed about her fragility, her dependence, her inevitable death, it's all entirely false.
It is the moment her internal world explodes. She realizes she has been manipulated on the most fundamental level. She doesn't need James's permission slips anymore.
So what does she do?
She sneaks into the ruins of the stone cottage, digs into the rotting floorboards, and finds one of Lily's old, discarded journals. She takes a sharp splinter of wood, pricks her own finger without hesitation, and using her own ink, she writes a simple, definitive command.
And that command is?
I run into the lake.
And?
Immediately, her body responds to her own command. She is sprinting out the back door, diving into the freezing Scottish waters, howling at the moon. She is completely, finally, undeniably free.
It sounds like an incredibly triumphant moment. She's reclaimed her agency. But power is a tricky thing. This triumph is actually the beginning of a very dark descent for her, isn't it?
It is. Armed with the intoxicating knowledge that she possesses limitless power and won't drop dead from using it, the dynamic between her and James severely fractures.
I can see why. They are on completely different trajectories now. James, despite his summer of rebellion and his creative awakening, fundamentally yearns for a grounded human life.
He wants normalcy.
Right, he wants to go back to New York, attend classes at NYU, endure the struggles of being a writer, and build a normal existence. But Nelle, she has been caged for 2 decades. Normalcy sounds like another prison to her.
Exactly. Nelle wants to test the absolute outermost limits of her newly discovered power across the globe. She wants to consume the world she was denied.
They realize their paths are diverging.
Heartbreakingly, yes. James cannot follow her into godhood, and she cannot shrink herself down to fit his mortal life. They separate.
And once she is alone, Nelle goes on an absolute bender of creation. She goes completely off the rails.
She starts relatively small, testing the waters. She writes poems on napkins that conjure glasses of rare ruby red wine out of thin air. She scripts beautiful, intricate silk dresses onto her body.
Living the dream.
She travels through Europe, going clubbing, taking pills with strangers, dancing until dawn, indulging in every sensory experience possible. But the high of small creations fades, and she pushes further.
What happens in Barcelona? Because this is where things cross a line from youthful rebellion to actual danger.
In Barcelona, she is sitting on a rooftop overlooking the city. Fueled by a mix of arrogance and curiosity, she decides to write a massive storm into existence simply to see if her power can affect the macro environment.
And it does.
It does. She summons black, churning clouds, deafening thunder, and a massive torrential downpour. But she loses control of the narrative. The storm causes a destructive, terrifying flood in the streets below.
She is playing God without understanding the consequences.
Precisely. And her power continues to evolve terrifyingly fast. By the time she travels to Tokyo, she realizes she has flexed the muscle enough that she no longer even needs a pen. She learns to teleport across the sprawling neon city with a mere concentrated thought.
I want to debate this phase of her journey because on one level, you are watching the psychological portrait of a person given absolute freedom without any established boundaries. It's like watching a teenager acting out a delayed rebellion.
But the stakes are higher.
The stakes are infinitely higher. When a normal 21-year-old makes a reckless mistake on a bender, they get a terrible hangover, an empty bank account, or a bruised ego.
Right.
When a being whose subconscious thoughts literally shape the physical fabric of reality makes a reckless mistake, it results in catastrophic natural disasters.
The absolute power begins to corrupt her, or at the very least, it entirely blinds her to the collateral damage of her spontaneous desires.
And that collateral damage eventually becomes fatal, doesn't it? The theoretical danger becomes very real.
Yes. In London, the atmospheric environment she recklessly creates, a sudden, unseasonal freezing rain, causes an innocent man to slip, strike his head on the slick cobblestone street, and die.
That is a harsh, violent wake-up call.
It shatters her god complex. Standing over the body of a stranger, Nelle is forced to confront the horrifying truth that Penelope warned her about.
That she's a danger.
Her very existence, unchecked and fueled by emotion, is an act of danger to the natural world. She realizes she is a walking anomaly. Accidents, tragedies, and deaths will continue to happen as long as she recklessly yields this godlike power among fragile humans.
Which sets the stage for the climax of the novel. Her realization drives her back to the source. She returns to Edinburgh.
She is drawn back to Calton Hill at the break of dawn. The setting is incredibly cinematic. You have the biting, freezing wind whipping across the elevated hill, the sweeping, misty view of the old town skyline waking up below.
And waiting for her there.
Waiting for her there is Penelope and, shockingly, Wallace Quill.
Quill tracked her down.
He tracked her through the innate, almost psychic bond they share as creator and creation. It is a profound confrontation. 3 generations of magical, cursed blood standing on a hill in the biting wind.
How does Quill react to seeing what she has become? Does he try to capture her again?
That is the surprising turn. Quill looks at Nelle, and he doesn't see a possession to be reclaimed. He sees the destruction she has caused across Europe, and in that destruction, he sees the terrifying reflection of his own monstrous nature.
He sees himself in her.
He recognizes the fatal flaw of his creation. He knows he cannot physically or magically control her anymore, and he finally accepts the profound danger they both pose to the world. He looks at his grandmother, Penelope, who simply asks him if this is the path he truly wants to take.
And what does Quill do?
In a final act of profound ambiguity, Quill pulls a small, pocket-sized journal from his coat. He uncaps his fountain pen filled with his own ink.
He's going to write.
He looks at Nelle one last time, a look filled with sorrow, regret, and perhaps a twisted kind of love, and he writes a single sentence. He writes his own end.
Wow.
Within seconds, his physical body simply evaporates into thick, gray smoke, carried away by the Highland wind. He ceases to exist.
I want to analyze that choice because it is so incredibly loaded. Was his suicide an act of redemption? Was it a noble sacrifice to permanently remove his darkness and control from Nelle's world? Or was it the ultimate narcissistic assertion of control?
It is a brilliantly debatable moment. You can argue that by writing his own death, he refused to surrender. He refused to let old age, consequence, the law, or the natural order of the world dictate his end.
He maintained his agency to the very end.
Even in death, He maintained his absolute agency right up to his final breath. He authored his exit.
That is a chilling way to interpret it. He exits the stage entirely on his own terms, leaving Nelle standing alone on the hill, grappling with her own terrible, limitless potential.
With her creator gone, the script is completely thrown out.
Nelle is left with the ultimate question. What will she do with her own story? Will she follow Quill's path into the smoke and erase herself to protect the fragile world, or will she find another way to exist?
She makes a definitive decision and immediately returns to America. She reunites briefly with James in Lincoln, Georgia.
Back where it started.
The setting for their reunion is deeply symbolic and melancholic. They meet at the burnt-out, ash-covered foundation of 23 Blackwood Road, the charred ruins of her former prison.
What is her plan?
Nelle tells James her intent, and it is devastating. After witnessing the death in London, she firmly believes she is too dangerous to exist.
She wants to end it.
She believes her ink is a fundamental curse, a poison to the natural order. And she tells James that the only way to keep the world, and specifically him, safe is to write her own end, exactly as Quill did. She intends to erase herself from reality.
That is absolutely gut-wrenching. How does James react to that? He loves her more than anything.
He loves her, but his journey has taught him the true meaning of love versus control. He knows he cannot stop her. He cannot force her to stay and live in fear of her own nature, and he absolutely refuses to take away her choice, because doing so would make him no better than Quill.
So he lets her do it.
He agrees to bear witness to her end. He says a heartbreaking, tear-filled goodbye. He turns his back to the ruins, leans his forehead against the cold, old brick of the surviving chimney, and promises to count aloud to 30 to give her the time to write the sentence.
I can't even imagine the agony of those 30 seconds. You listening have to imagine James standing there, the smell of old ash in the air, tears streaming down his face, counting 28, 29, 30, just waiting for the sickening sound of the love of his life vanishing into thin air.
He finishes the count. The silence is deafening. He finally turns around to face the ashes.
And what did he see?
Nelle is physically gone. The space where she stood is empty. But left behind on the gray, soot-covered ground is the red cloth journal she carried.
The journal.
It is splayed open to the wind. Beside it rests her silver fountain pen, the nib still glistening wet with fresh black ink. James slowly approaches and looks down at the pages of the journal. They are completely blank.
She didn't write it.
She chose not to end her life. In her final, defining act, she reclaimed her ultimate agency by consciously refusing to put pen to paper.
She refused to be a tragedy.
She refused to let fear dictate her end. Instead, she chose to step off the page entirely. She vanished into the vastness of the world to live unobserved, unreported, and fiercely independent. She finally chose to be the wild horse.
It is such a beautiful, powerful subversion of expectations. By leaving the journal blank, she is asserting that her life, her existence, does not need to be documented, controlled, or validated by ink to be real. She can just be.
And this choice profoundly impacts James's own character arc. The story provides a brief epilogue that jumps forward in time. We find James living in New York City, exactly where he always dreamt of being under the fireworks that 4th of July.
So he made it out of Lincoln.
He did. He is studying creative writing in a prestigious program at NYU. He is working an entry-level job at Random House Publishing, and he is dating a sharp, intelligent, grounded Columbia MFA student named Lucy.
He got his normal life.
He is no longer the terrified, paralyzed boy afraid to disappoint his parents. He has navigated the fire and emerged as a genuine writer dealing with the complexities of normal adult life.
But there is this beautifully bittersweet detail regarding his own writing, specifically the novel he wrote during their magical summer.
Yes. James's cousin Jesse experienced a devastating apartment fire in Williamsburg, and in that blaze, James lost the only physical, typewritten copy of his novel, The Summer Curse.
The manuscript is gone.
He completely lost the manuscript that documented his and Nelle's magical, terrifying journey.
How does he handle losing the only proof that any of it actually happened?
When Lucy asks him about the lost manuscript, James is surprisingly at peace with it. He realizes that Nelle and the incredible story of their summer together was like a first novel. It was a formative experience meant only for his memory.
Just for him.
It was the crucible that taught him how to love selflessly, how to find his voice, and most importantly, how to let go. He learns a profound truth: not every story needs to be published, printed, or consumed by the public to be deeply, fundamentally meaningful. Some stories just build the person you are meant to become.
The visual contrast at the end of the book is so striking. You have the lingering memory of the dark, ash-covered ground of Blackwood Road in Georgia, juxtaposed against the final image of James standing on the bright, snowy, bustling streets of Manhattan, looking up at the silver tower of his publishing job.
He is exactly where he needs to be.
He was scourged by the fire of his experiences, but he was not consumed by them. Nelle taught him to be brave enough to seek his own life, and in return, he gave her the unwavering belief that she was inherently worthy of freedom.
It is a remarkable narrative achievement by Garrett Curbow.
So what an incredible, sprawling journey. We have traced the epic narrative of Whispers of Ink and Starlight. It is a story that takes the literal magic of words and uses it to explore the terrifying, suffocating grip of generational trauma, the toxic nature of total control, and the ultimate hard-won triumph of picking up the pen, or, perhaps more importantly, actively choosing to put the pen down to dictate your own destiny.
And exploring this narrative leaves us with a lingering, provocative thought regarding the legacy of what we leave behind. Throughout this story, we see characters obsessively documenting their lives, attempting to control reality through meticulous records and forced narratives.
Right.
But Nell's final act of leaving a blank journal suggests a different kind of power entirely. It makes you consider your own legacy. What if the most powerful, loving thing you can pass down to the next generation is not a heavily scripted set of rules or a predetermined path or a fully written story they are forced to inhabit?
What if the greatest gift you can leave behind is simply the blank space?
Exactly. The untouched page giving someone else the absolute freedom to write their own beginning.
That is an incredibly powerful thought to sit with. A blank page isn't an ending. It is the ultimate canvas for freedom.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Go out there and leave some pages blank.